My name is Holly Hall, and my speech is titled, Rome Wasn't Built in a Day. So we've all heard the saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. Actually, the Colosseum took 10 years to build, and the Roman Empire had been building since 27 BC. Like many other ancient cities, Rome has had its rise and its falls, along with not only the government, but a lot of their monuments have risen and been taken apart either by natural disaster or pillagers, taking it for their houses. A lot of buildings that are in Rome are not still the same buildings, or they've been modified or not kept up to date, but the Colosseum is one of those. According to Tours Around Rome, in 2013, Rome had 12.6 million tourists, with the Colosseum attracting over 5 million of those annually. Rome sets the standards for cities everywhere, creating the first roads, aqueducts, even creating the first mall. So we shouldn't be surprised when the Colosseum's still standing and we have our CenturyLink Center or the Pinnacle Bank in Lincoln that are built almost exactly the same as the Roman Colosseum. The Flavian Amphitheater is also known as the Colosseum nowadays, is one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was built and looked completely different than what it is now. And today I'm going to give you information on what it looked like and how they built it, what it was used for, and what happened after the Colosseum was no longer in use. So in 72 AD, Emperor Vespasian commissioned the Flavian Amphitheater. The Colosseum, now is what we call it, was built to replace the amphitheater that had been burnt down when they changed over dynasties. So when the Colosseum was built, approximately 100,000 slaves were used for physical labor, and a lot of them actually had to move limestone from Tivoli to Rome, which is 20 miles. The emperor also enlisted artists, engineers, and just designers, basically, to come up for the plan of the Colosseum. He wanted this to be the biggest and the best Colosseum, best amphitheater that they had in Rome, and to this day it is the biggest that was built during the Roman period. The Colosseum was built out of bricks and tile to build up the floors and the walls, and the arched, vaulted arches were made out of cement, because cement's lighter than tile and brick. It can withstand more weight, making it able to be larger. The Colosseum is one of the first buildings to use cement, and the Romans are actually the ones that came up with the idea for cement. So what they did was they started to use sand and lava, like lava rocks, and mix the right combination to make this structure light enough that they can build 4 levels. Once the Colosseum structure was put in place, once they put those bricks and tile down, what they did was they lined everything with either limestone or marble, and it was placed over the top of the structure to make it look more elegant. So the limestone was used for the ground floor, as well as there's the pillars on the outside. Marble was used for the seats, the statues, and what you would be able to see from the very outside of the walls. So at the Colosseum, there are 80 arched, vaulted arches on each of the 4 floors. The 4th floor was actually not in the original plan. They added the 4th floor later, and once they did add the 4th floor, they also put a covering or an awning around the top of it to keep the spectators out of the sun. The arches were actually not just for looks, they had served a purpose. So with those 80 arches, it made for easier exits for all of the spectators, so it could clear the amphitheater in about 10 to 15 minutes. So under the main arena where the gladiators would fight, there are rooms and tunnels that were built, and those actually housed the animals that were there for the fights. And some of the gladiators, due to the fact that gladiators were mostly slaves or people who didn't have any houses, people who were sentenced to death. So the Romans came up with the pulley system so that the doors from the bottom, they could open up a door. The animal that was in the cage could walk out and see the light. They usually fought many battles, and so the starting of the Colosseum is kind of how that was built, and they wanted a lot of decorative, wanted it to be beautiful and, you know, something that people would come and see from other towns. Well, what they did at the Colosseum was they wanted this to be a place for events, for funeral games, chariot races, basically so the emperors could show off and kind of impress people as their form of entertainment. Like we go to the movies, they went to the gladiator battles. So a little bit about the gladiator battles is they started out with the funeral games, and then the funeral games lost their ancestral touch, and they kind of started to get to where they wanted to be more of a sporting event and more action. So what they did was they started animal fights. So they would put a lion against a tiger, and after that they started to make gladiators fight animals, or they would have gladiators fight one another. So the Colosseum, from the time that it was opened, had numerous, uncountable fights between gladiators. So thousands of animals and men were slaughtered for show, and Romans were very violent in how they fought. The last recorded game was in the 6th century, and after that the Colosseum started to die down, and Rome was at a little bit of a turning point. And so when Rome was at a turning point, this is where we have the Colosseum that we see today. When Rome was at their turning point, people looted the place. They took all the marble off the stairs. They took the gold and the diamonds that were in there are holes. I don't know if you've seen the Colosseum up close, but there's holes in the Colosseum. And it's where they used to have emblems of like golds, gladiators and statues. That was all looted for other people to take to their houses. And so now today what we see is not the same Colosseum that we would have seen back then. Today we actually see a Colosseum that has had one of the sides shattered by an earthquake. So you have one side that stands taller than the other. The floor is actually no longer there that the gladiators used to fight on. You can actually see down into the tunnels and see all the rooms that they had. And so the information I gave you today, I just wanted to kind of summarize where the Colosseum, or how grand the Colosseum was at one point in time, and how even though we don't have all of the marble and the limestone and all the beautiful emblems that they had back then, you still have plenty of tourists that go and see the Colosseum and make it one of the 7 wonders of the world to see that it's still standing. Thanks, guys.